Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio, and it is a very special week, ladies and gentlemen. I always like it when big news drops on a Wednesday, because quite frankly, I'm a Wednesday kind of guy. I make podcasts on a Wednesday, and if important news drops on a Thursday or a Friday, well, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to wait a couple of days to hear it. Good news is, this has dropped on a Wednesday. Now, there is some slightly less exciting news we'll get to afterwards, and I might have a little talk about Tool Drop at the end. I don't know if I'm going to have time, but essentially, if it doesn't say Tool Drop in the title, and you flick to the end and I'm not talking about Tool Drop, I've probably left it till next week. If either of those things has happened, I've probably done it this week. But what we really need to talk about this week, ladies and gentlemen, is the world's requirements have been announced, and they are, to be blunt, pretty gosh darn exciting. Now, what's particularly exciting is that it's very, very different to previous years. The format's different, the price structure's different, the entry requirements are different. There are an awful lot of things different, and that's why I'm going to do a podcast pretty much dedicated to it. Now, two very big appendices before we start here, two big codices or whatever word you want to use. First of all, this information was put up on the official Pokemon website this afternoon, or early evening, I suppose, UK time, and has since been taken down. Now, because I've always got one eye on the podcast, I immediately screenshotted it and posted it in a Word document, so I still have access to it. If you haven't done that, you will not have access to it. PokeBeach.com does have some of the information pointed out, but it actually hasn't got all the information on there yet. It's got some of the information, but not all of it. The other thing is, it's just come out. I am doing this podcast less than an hour after I saw the website, probably about half an hour. So, I haven't had time to properly digest this and to look at it and to put it all into perspective, so bear in mind if the odd little mistake is made here or there. You know, you'll have to forgive me. Now, one thing that is worth pointing out, I always thought that the reason this was delayed, the announcement, was because they'd booked a venue, probably in Florida, and that they had then basically stopped it at the last minute for various reasons, including Japanese people don't want to go to Florida, it's too far, from what I've heard, and the weather is unpredictable in Florida in the summer. Lots of heat, potential hurricanes, not good. But given the changes made, it's now particularly likely that it was delayed not just because of that, but because they were putting all the finishing touches. The other thing that must be pointed out, of course, is that the fact this has been taken down off the website does suggest it's not final information, that it is potentially going to be changed in the future. But it was done like a proper website. Somebody had taken an awful lot of time and effort into putting this up, and often when things like this happen on websites, it's either because the information was leaked too early, or because there was one or two small changes that need to be made. So, let's get right into all the information, and I will give you my impressions as we go along. First things first, it is happening at the Heinz Convention Center in Boston, Massachusetts. This is not particularly exciting for me. I was hoping for San Diego or Detroit, but that's because I follow football teams in San Diego and Detroit. I would like to go there. Those cities fascinate me. Boston doesn't, but I've heard a lot of good reports about Boston, and as I've told you guys before, I am very much looking to go this year. I've been asked that by a lot of people, especially after I started leaking news of this on Twitter, and just pointing out, I think I was pretty much the first kind of Pokemon TCG focused website to put it out there. Just saying, I beat, shall we say, another more well-known website to the punch. You know, just putting it out there. And so, people have already been asking me about whether I'm going, and the chances are I will be. Now, it is an invitation-only event, which is, important. It always has been, but here's something different. There is no last chance qualifier. There is no last chance qualifier. If you don't have an invite before you go, you ain't playing in the main event. Although, as we'll see in a second, part of that is because they have significantly dropped the entry requirements. Now, speaking of the entry requirements, it is going to take, for Masters in the US and Canada and Europe, 300 championship points, 200 in Latin America, Asia and South Africa. Now that is a huge drop. It was 500 last year, they've dropped it down to 300 this year. That makes it exponentially easier for you to get in, it's just about half the requirements. I ended up with about 200 last year and I wasn't really trying. Admittedly, the huge bulk of that happened because I managed to fluke my way to doing well at the ECC, but that's not the point. The point is they've dropped the entry requirements considerably, and this tallies exactly with losing the last chance qualifier. They are not letting people go for a last chance qualifier, but they're letting people who do decently well get in. What that means is, if you go to a load of tournaments and do alright at a bunch of them, you're probably going to end up with an invite. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, hang on a second, everyone's going to play until they've got 300 points and then stop. No. There is no incentive to stop at 300 points, and we'll get to that in a minute. For seniors, it's 250 in US and Europe, 150 everywhere else, and for juniors, it's 200 in US and Europe, and 100 everywhere else. So seniors and juniors, it's getting quite easy to get in if you are of a decent playing ability and you go to enough tournaments, which is obviously more difficult as a senior and a junior because you've got to convince friends, parents, etc. to take you along. So, much lower requirement. Essentially, you can't fluke your way in with a last chance qualifier, but by the same token, who is going to not be able to get 300 championship points and get through the last chance qualifier? Now, admittedly, that happens occasionally, and I am proof of that a couple of years back, but quite frankly, if you're not good enough to get 300 points, you're probably not good enough to play at Worlds. Now, I am someone who is planning to go to a lot of tournaments this year. Am I going to get a qualification for Worlds? Well, possibly not, because every time I try, I end up at almost exactly half the amount. Needed 40, got 20, needed 400, got 200, so we'll see. I'm thinking strongly about playing a rogue deck at the regionals this coming Saturday, so, we shall see. Now, I told you that there is no real, people aren't going to be stopping at 300 points. There's no real incentive to do so. And the reason is, the top 16 players from US and Canada and the top 22 players from Europe get a travel award. Now, this has yet to be fully confirmed, but reading it as it's written, what that means is, if you are one of the top 22 in Europe, 16 in the US, your flight will be paid for you. Now, whether that includes hotel as well, I would imagine not, because it's not a paid invite, it's just a travel award, and whereas kind of getting an invite through Nationals has always given you this travel award and your hotel, but if somebody else has got a different interpretation of that, and if travel award is generally taken to include hotel as well as the travel itself, please do let me know. Now, this is quite good, of course, because people coming from Europe over to Boston, Massachusetts, it's a hell of a flight. You're going to be paying, I haven't looked, but probably around £600 to £800, given the cost of flying to New York, Washington, etc. So that's going to be a hell of a lot of free money. And that means that rather than getting to 300 points and going, whoop, I have qualified, I'm done now, people are going to get to 300 points and then go, right, I'm going to keep clamouring for points, and this is going to mean that I'm going to potentially have a paid invite, or at least my travel paid. Now, this does introduce an interesting thing, and that is that by bringing the number down from 500 to 300, number of championship points to get into Worlds, it is probably going to make a lot more people qualify. But by giving this massive incentive, and it's not the only incentive they get, but by giving this massive incentive to the top players in each region, then it means people are going to keep going and going and going. So whereas last year you could get to 500, and some people would take their foot off the pedal, or they'd have 500 and their mates would have 400, so they'd scoop to them in the later rounds of later tournaments in the year, that's not going to happen this year. Because, I don't scoop to people anyway, except for very rare circumstances, as I've made very clear on this podcast on a number of occasions. But if I have got my invite, and my mate needs another 50 points for an invite, and I can knock them out of top cut, stopping them getting their invite, but increasing my chances of getting, like, £700 of free flight, sorry, I don't love my friends that much. Does that sound mean? Probably does. Good job my girlfriend doesn't play Pokémon. That could lead to some awkward moments. This is, of course, assuming I'm in a position where I've got an invite and my friends haven't, which, based on previous years, probably not going to happen. Just putting it out there. So, that's where we are in that in that respect. By the way, it's the top 8 players in Latin America and Asia Pacific that get these travel awards. In Japan and Korea, they are having a different system which has yet to be announced. So, it is actually going to be a 3-day tournament, and this is another reason they've got rid of the last chance qualifier, one would imagine. Because the Friday is being used for the first day or two, for the first few rounds of the tournament. But it's a weird kind of structure. Essentially, everybody goes into day one unless you are one of the top 16 in US, 22 in Europe. Those people, as well as getting a travel award, essentially get a day's worth of buy. And given there could be 8-9 rounds on day one, an 8 or 9 round buy is pretty gosh darn nice. So if you in top 16, top 22, you're not going to be getting that buy. Now here is an interesting thing. Because if you win Nationals, or at least do well enough at Nationals to get a paid invite, you get your travel and your accommodation paid for. If you are the top 16 in US, 22 in Europe, then you're going to have only your travel, potentially not your accommodation paid for, but you get automatically into day 2. Something to consider. Now, I was chatting to my friend Luke Kirkham from the blog victory-road.co, and he actually told me about this information, so huge thanks to him. But the other thing he pointed out to me is that you're going to get 500 points if you win Nationals, and if you're not in the top 16, top 22 before Nationals, then getting an extra 500 points, there's a pretty good chance that will put you into that top bracket. So there is going to probably be a huge amount of overlap between the top 22 in Europe in terms of points and European Nationals winners. Something to point out. Now on Friday, everyone with an invite other than those people who are automatically into day 2 are going to go into a tournament. And essentially, it's not the top number, there are a certain amount of match points needed. And as soon as you reach that number of match points on day 1, you're done. Because when you get to day 2, and more on this in a minute, new tournament, new decks, new records, if you get to the required number of match points, there is literally no incentive whatsoever, as it's currently been announced, to carrying on. So you might as well just stop. And essentially, and there is a pattern to this, I've worked out the pattern, I've used my maths. It is the number of rounds minus 2 times by 3. Essentially, you need to win every game with 2 losses, or, you win every game and then you skip the last 2, and that will get you in. So, 8 rounds, 18 points, essentially 6 wins. 8 minus 2 is 6, times 3 is 18. If there's 6 rounds, you need 12 points to get in to day 2, which is of course 4 victories. Now this is pretty harsh. 3 victories only gives you 9 points, and that means you would have to draw every other game in 6 rounds, so you would have to go 3-0-3 in order to get in. It also means that there will quickly come a point where you are mathematically eliminated from the tournament. So if I'm in a 6-round tournament and I have a loss and a draw, then I have 1 point, and there are 12 available to me, that's fine. If I have a loss and 2 draws, then that means there are 9 points available to me. I have 2, I cannot possibly get more than 11 points, and I need 12 to get to day 2. Which is going to have a weird effect, in that if I am on the cusp, if I'm one of those people that has an early loss, but then, reels off 3, 4, 5 victories in a row, my path is going to become exponentially easier. Because there are going to be some people, like for instance myself if I qualify, where I'm just going to probably play it out because it's Worlds. But there's going to be a bunch of people who go, I'm mathematically eliminated, I'm out. And I talked about this last year. There were people who went 0-2, and there was one person at Worlds 2014 who went 0-2 and dropped, despite the fact everyone who went 7-2 automatically got into top 8 of Worlds this year, which was very silly of that particular person. And the records are all online, you can go and look at who I'm talking about if you really want to. But what this basically means is, there's going to be a bunch of people who go, look, I'm mathematically eliminated, there's no point staying in, I'm done. Think about the Oakland Raiders. They're going to be the Raiders. And there's going to be a bunch of people that go, you know what, I'm already in the playoffs, and I'm already into Saturday. I'm going to be playing Saturday, and I can't get any more points or do any better, so I'm out. Think the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 17 last year. They're already in. They cannot get a bye. They cannot win the division, and essentially they're going to be. I think they were the 5th seed last year. They're going to be the 5th seed. There's no point carrying on. Let's play our reserve team and still almost beat the Chargers, who need a missed field goal from about 30 yards and a fake punt just to get the win. That was nerve-wracking. Sorry if you don't watch American football. So, what that's going to mean is there's going to be a bunch of people who kind of in the last round or two need one more win to get in, And actually, there's going to be a lot less people in there. So you could even have a situation where there's an odd number of people still playing and someone who needs a win gets a bye, which will be kind of funky. I mean, it's almost certainly not going to happen, because there would have to be no one with a worse record than you still left in. But say there were 5 people fighting for 3 more places, well, one of those people could end up getting a bye. That's an extreme situation, but hopefully you see where I'm going with this. Going into the Saturday, you've got all the people that got the requisite number of points on Friday, plus the people who got a bye into Saturday automatically, and it is a completely new tournament. Match records from Friday will not carry forward. You do not have to use the same deck as Friday. You can change entirely. It's a new tournament. And this interests me, because I'm wondering, and I did tweet this out a little while back, I am wondering if people are going to almost not really care so much about day 1 of Worlds. Now, presumably everyone's still getting the player pack, and if I get into Worlds, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I'm really after. But it basically means that people who get into day 1 of Worlds, well, you know, it's nice that you got into day 1, but you didn't get into day 2. Loads of people are going to be in day 1. Day 2 is going to be the coveted one. It's almost like day 1 is a last chance qualifier, but you need 300 championship points just to get in. And really, the Saturday is the real Worlds. That is one way of viewing it. I'm not saying that's the way I do view it. I'm just saying it's a way that one could view it if they so wished. So there's an interesting little one. And then you go through, and it's the usual thing, and it goes forward, and there will be a top 8 starting late Saturday, and then you go through to the actual winners. So essentially, Friday, if you've got 300 championship points. Saturday, if you've got the bye through to round 2 for being one of the top people in your region. A top second day, I should say, for being one of the top people in your region, or if you've got the requisite number of match points on Friday. Speaking of which, can I just take a second to point out how awesome this is? There's no, oh, I'm going to bubble, I got the same number of points. No, there's a set number of points, either you make it or you don't. None of this opponent's win percentage malarkey. That, ladies and gentlemen, is amazing. One more thing which I forgot to point out, obviously, when we're looking at the top 16 in the US and Canada, or the top 22 in Europe, there may be a situation, like we had with Tamal Cameron at Worlds a couple of years in 2012, where 2 people have got the same number of points, and one's 22nd, one's 23rd. In previous years, it's been, and it doesn't say, it just says the top players, but in previous years, it's always been championship points with ELO as a tiebreaker, although they did let Tamal Cameron in with the same number of points. It was top 40 in Europe, or top 50 at the time. My good friend Tamal Cameron was actually, he was on the bubble, he was 41st or 51st, but had the same number of points as the person who was 40th or 50th, and they let him in. I can't imagine they'll do that this year, given that in order to do so, they've got to give you like a potentially £700-800 travel stipend for your flight, and give you entry into day 2. But it's almost certainly going to be championship points with ELO as a tiebreaker, which does mean, of course, if people keep hammering through tournaments to try and get more championship points, they could in fact hurt their ELO score and end up losing on a tiebreaker. Although, of course, it's still worth doing, because it's more of a risk that other people are going to play when you're not playing and get the extra championship points. Now, going into prizes, the prizes this year are a lot better. It's always been a £10,000 scholarship for winning, at least for several years. It is now £1,500 if you get top 32. $1,000. That's important because the exchange rate is like $1.6 to a pound. Top 16 gets you $2,500. Top 8 gets you $5,000. Top 4 gets you $7,500. Second gets you $15,000. And if you win Worlds, ladies and gentlemen, that is a $25,000 scholarship. That is utterly, crazily good money. So, yeah, it's pretty gosh darn good. First to fourth will also receive a trophy and enough championship points to go to Worlds 2016. There will be a travel award for the winner. Ooh. That's interesting. It doesn't say a travel award. Sorry, sorry for just stalling a second there and starting to mumble. They've changed it. It was that top 4 got you a paid invite, nothing else worked. It seems to be, the way they've written it is, For the top four, championship points equal to qualification level for 2016. So top four gets an invite. But it says a travel award for the winner to the 2016 World Championships. So that apparently means that top four get an invite, but only the winner gets a paid invite, which is interesting, because Pokemon are throwing money at Worlds this year. You know, these they're essentially giving like 60 travel awards. That's a hell of a lot of travel awards. Far more than they have before, and this is of course presumably in addition to the travel awards for the winners of nationals and the top 4, 8, whatever, although I don't know that they've been announced yet, so that's pretty interesting. By the way, there's been no announcement, so we are assuming that the championship point level for each tournament is the same, especially as they've started to be awarded, and they've been awarded at the same level for the regionals, etc., that have been carrying on. That seems a fair assumption to make at this stage. So it seems like top 4 get an invite, but only the winner gets a paid invite, which is weird when they're giving away like 60 travel awards for people on championship points. It seems odd to also not give travel awards for the top 4 at Worlds. Having said that, well, the amount of travel awards they are giving out for championship points, you know, maybe they're going to do that again next year, so they're cutting 3 of them from Worlds and adding like 60 from championship points. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. If you get top 4, as well as the trophy, the points, you're also going to get 2 boxes of each of the most current Pokemon expansion for a year, and factory sealed full sets of the 4 most recent expansions. So the last 4, factory sealed set, the next 4, 2 boxes. Top 32 get 2 boxes of the most current expansion and some points. Now there are some other information which we're going to go to very quickly. You must have an active Play Pokemon account. I mean, you really, really should. You need to register for the tournament online. That's important. Don't forget to do so beforehand. You must adhere to the tournament rules, obviously. There's going to be a bunch of information about travel awards which you need to read later. There's no entry fee to the World Championships, and winners of selected national championships will be guaranteed travel awards even if they don't qualify for a Day 2 invitation in their rating zone. I.e., you're going to get the travel stipend even if you don't end up getting into Day 2 because you don't have enough points. So they're saying that the travel award for winners will be in addition to the people getting them for championship points. That, ladies and gentlemen, is an awful lot of information. Feel free to tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, WordPress, etc., just stick a comment down below and I shall get back to you to the best of my knowledge. But I think I've explained everything I can. 300 championship points is more doable, but I kind of like the way that they've done it so that, because if it was just 300 and there was no extra incentive, people would get to 300 and then it would be Scoop City for a lot of people. Now it's basically screw you, I want my travel award. Loads of people, about 60 overall, are going to end up getting travel awards. Now I know some of them would also get travel awards from winning nationals, etc., but that might not happen. Essentially 60 extra travel awards, roughly. And, you know, 60 extra travel awards, and, you know, that Day 2 buy, that means that people are going to carry on playing even when they've got into Worlds. Whether I'll get there, I don't know. It depends how many tournaments I go to, and it depends what I play, because I have an awful habit of taking substandard decks which I find fun, and that's why I never get into Worlds. I'll practice with the good decks, I'll get good with the good decks, and then I'll turn up to a tournament with Flareon, or some stupid build of a deck which no one else plays, or something ridiculous. I mean, I've spent a lot of time this past week testing Speed Lugia with Chandelure EX. Yeah. So, I don't know. We'll see if I can actually bring myself to play sensible decks, or just get lucky. Even if not, a lot of people ask this question, will continue to, so let me make it clear. I am very, very much looking to go to Worlds next year, and even if I don't qualify, you know. Now, there are other things going on. First of which, the first UK regional of the season is happening this coming weekend in Newport in Wales. It is the Aberdare regional, but it's happening down in Newport. And very important information, which I didn't realise until today, /forgot, Phantom Forces is not legal. It has, by Saturday, it will not have been 21 days since a street date for Phantom Forces. Phantom Forces will not be legal for this tournament. I've had a nasty shock, because I had finally found a deck which I liked and was willing to play and was testing, and it was testing well, and I think I went 8-0 with it last night, and I beat Vrizian Genesect, and I beat Night March, and I beat an Evil Tau deck, and I beat a Plasma, and it was all going well, and then I realised Phantom Forces is not legal, and I can't play any of the decks I've been testing. The good news is I've got today and tomorrow to test them. So if you're going, please do watch out. Another thing to watch out for, there is likely to be streaming from the event. Now, I've got a long drive home after the event, so I'm not going to be staying too late. But if it finishes at a reasonable time, Terry Goodacre, the wonderful chap from Wakefield Pokémon, is looking to stream the Top Cut. Now, he'll put the links up on Verbank Gym. I will try and get the link out on my Twitter page on Saturday evening. Now look around about 5 to 6 p.m. UK time, which is currently Greenwich Mean Time. We've lost British summertime, unfortunately. So it's going to be around the clock. It's going to be around, I think it's back to GMT now. Fairly certain. So, look out for that. I will be tweeting out the link, but something to get excited about. If I'm not in Top Cut, and I don't have a good deck for the weekend, so there's a good chance, I shall be the commentator for that stream, for as long as I can stay, given that I've got a long drive home. So, as well as the podcast and the YouTube videos, there is a very good chance I will be commentating on that stream live over the good old interweb, and I will put it out on my Twitter channel. One thing we're looking to do is, rather than just stream the games, but have some interviews and me chatting, etc. in the interim, because one of my least favourite things about streams is how you watch a game and then you have to potter about for half hour, 40 minutes while you figure out if there's going to be another game or not. We're looking to do a much more streamlined version, and we're looking to provide you with some content in between the games, so keep your eye out on Verbank City Gym, the Facebook page, and keep your eye out to my Twitter account, so that if we do go and do that streaming, and I do get the commentating, you should be aware of it. So even if I'm not in Top Cut, and this is the other thing, I'm not so worried about Top Cut this week, because I quite fancy the idea of going and doing a little bit of commentating. So that's something to look out for. Now, I don't think we're going to get to Tool Drop this week, so let's have a look at the other couple bits of news and just go through it. Now, there was and I'm not going to explain this in a huge amount of detail because it's essentially useless now, but there was a kind of rewording of defending Pokemon, and it was essentially any Pokemon being hit by the attack. Now, essentially what happened was, it basically turned around that Landorus would be able to use Fighting Stadium in order to add damage to the bench. There has been an errata, and Fighting Stadium now reads, the attacks of each fighting type Pokemon in play do 20 more damage to the opponent's active Pokemon if it is a Pokemon EX. An errata basically means that from now on, we read Fighting Stadium as if that's what it says, even though it doesn't. It's a slightly new wording which has caused an unintended consequence, but it essentially has no practical effect. It's the same as it was. Please don't worry your pretty little heads about it. I will go more into this next week when I've got more time, but essentially it's not a huge deal. Now, Jamming Net has also had an errata. It reads, the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to do 20 less damage to each of the opponent's Pokemon. And this has changed because the tool now will only impact the Pokemon belonging to the opponent of the attacking Pokemon. Small change there, nothing to get too excited about. Now, in terms of news, there is some exciting news come out this past week, and that is, firstly, that a parade in South Korea to honour the South Korean Pokemon World Champion had to be cancelled because too many people turned out. I wish it was like that in this country. I get mocked by my friends for Pokemon. But we've also had some cards released from the Primal Clash set. And these are new types of cards. We've seen Groudon and Kyogre with the Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre. These are new cards, and they are, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, pretty gosh darn exciting. They have these new abilities, or I don't know what we call them. They're Alpha and Omega, basically. And they're good. let's start off with Torchic. Torchic has a new one. It has Omega Multi-Strike, which we haven't seen before. Now, these cards are kind of like full art, except they don't go over the border in the way full art cards have in the past, and the bottom kind of quarter to a third of the card is covered in colour. Although the picture takes up the whole of the card, it doesn't go out of the border like the full art EXs have done. And also, like I say, there's about a third to a quarter to a third of it, which is taken up with colour, although if you look, the picture does carry on under the colour. Now, it's been suggested these are going to be known as half art cards, but half art has long been used to refer to non-full art EXs, so half art Evil Tal and full art Evil Tal. I don't know what you're going to call these. I don't see why we can't call them full art. We have full art Dialga, the Metal Dialga. We have full art, Zekrom and Reshiram, so I don't see why these can't be full art as well. That's what I'm going to be calling them. There is a full art Torchic, by the way, no word on rarity. Yeah. It's a 50 HP basic and it's full art. That alone makes me very, very happy. But it's got this Omega Multi-Strike, and it says that you can attack twice. If your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out with a first attack, then you get to attack the new defending Pokemon. Now, both Sceptile and Swampert have stolen Groudon and Kyogre's, Omega and Alpha stuff. So there is a decent chance that this is also going to appear on another Pokemon. Obviously, Torchic's not a major attacker, but imagine if the Blaziken has a decent attack and the ability to attack twice. That's going to be pretty damn good. Now, the second attack is kind of rubbish, 20 damage if you flip heads for a Fire Energy, meh. But the first attack, discard a Fire Energy, draw 2 cards. But you can do that twice. So you discard 2 Fire Energy and draw 2 cards. Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that we have the supporter Blacksmith, which allows you to attach 2 Fire Energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. You can use this on turn 1 so that you can Blacksmith turn 2 onto something like, a Pyro or even a Bench Blaziken or whatever. And this is going to be really good for setting up Fire-type decks that revolve around this Blacksmith. Not only that, but you're going to have 4 extra cards. And yes, your opponent can end you to get rid of those cards. But your opponent isn't going to end you every time. If you start without a supporter, but you start with a Torchic, dump 2 energy in the discard pile, draw 4 cards, and worst case scenario, your opponent ends you. You didn't have a supporter anyway. And then if they don't end you, that's an extra 4 cards. It's going to add much needed speed and consistency to fire decks. It is a 50 HP basic, which we can get excited about. And how long has it been since you were able to do that? Now, there does seem to be an Acrobike card, which acts as a draw card, but unfortunately we've yet to see a translation of it. Sceptile has Groudon's Omega Barrier. When your opponent plays a trainer card, prevent all effects of that card done to this Pokemon. Now, I wasn't precise enough when I explained this last week with Groudon, so let me be much clearer this week. It says trainer card, it says excluding tools and stadium cards. What that means is, Pokemon tools, like the Team Flare tools, do affect Groudon, or Primal Groudon, and they do affect Sceptile. But supporters do not. What that means is they could not drag Sceptile active using Lysandra, because it would be affecting the Sceptile. Similarly, they would not be able to use Team Flare Grunt, or Xerasic, or anything along those lines, a supporter which does something to Sceptile. Now, in terms of attack, for a Grass Energy it does 30 damage, 60 on a heads. For 2 Grass and a Colourless it does 120 damage. You can discard an energy to poison them. It's not amazing, to be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan. It's got uses, but it's not amazing. What I am a huge fan of is Swampert. Now, going back to these Alpha Omega stuff, what generally happens with Pokemon is that they change the wording to get around existing cards. So, for instance, we had your Vileplume, which shut off abilities, and we had things that shut off Poké Powers. Poké Bodies, and we had things that shut off Poké Powers, and then abilities come around and they no longer work. Abilities are not Poké Powers or abilities. So we've still got abilities, and you've got your things like Wobbuffet and Garbodor, which shut off these abilities, but these Alpha Omega things, I need a better word than that, to be honest. Ancient Traits. There we go. I think they're called Ancient Traits. Read it on Poké Beach. These Ancient Traits will not be shut off by this. Now, Swampert has an ancient trait. He's got alpha growth, i.e. you can attach 2 energy cards from your hand. Something that somebody tweeted at me, I'll have to see if I can find who it was, but something that somebody tweeted at me very helpfully, and whoever it was, I thank you for doing so, was that actually it does not say water energy, it says energy. So you could combine this with something like a rainbow energy, and that would allow you to maybe combo this with something like Aromatisse and get your rainbow energy into play, and then move them off using Aromatisse. You could attach 2 rainbow energy in one turn to Swampert, and then Aromatisse them up to whatever you wanted, because they would count as fairy energy, and you'd be able to use Aromatisse to switch them around. Just a nice little interesting thing which somebody pointed out to me, which I thought was kind of cool. So, yeah, there's that. But that's not all that's good about this card, just in case you needed anything else to be particularly good. Now, it's got an ability. During your turn, you may search your deck for any one card. That is ridiculous. This is the old Staraptor ability, and this was before even my time playing. Search your deck for any card every turn. That's ridiculous. I love this card. I was talking with my friend Paul over the last couple of days. He's gone and bought a bunch of World Championship decks, and we're going to play with them. And we were discussing favourite formats. Speaking of which, I may do a YouTube video about that soon. And I was saying that I loved the old SP format, because between Pokédraw Plus, Unknown R, Claydol, Uxie, etc., decks drew, and you won not because you whiffed, you won because you played better or had a better deck. This adds massive consistency. I don't have a supporter, but I've got Swampert, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is just as gosh darn good. I need a laser for a KO. I don't need to fish for a Juniper and hope I draw 7 off that Juniper. I can get that laser. This makes it... I love this card so much, ladies and gentlemen, because it adds consistency. You don't have to attack with Swampert. You can just have him on the bench and you've got consistency. It currently doesn't read, and remember these are Japanese cards that have been translated into English. We'll need to see the final English translation to be sure, but this isn't limited to 1 per turn. You get Swampert on the bench, you get any 2 cards. This is brilliant. I love this card. You're going to get what you need, and it's just superb. Now, it's also got a half-decent attack. 3 colourless energy, 40 damage, 30 more for each water. If there's free water, that does 130. Now, bearing in mind, you can put 1 on Mudkip. Do you like Mudkip? I heard you like Mudkip. On the first turn of the game, then you can rare candy, attach 2 from your hand, and do 130 on turn 2. Plus, you've got the ability Diving Search. It's just brilliant. Swampert is amazing. And I echo the call, and I really should start writing down the people who send me these tweets, because some weeks I get an awful lot of tweets. By the way, I love that. Keep tweeting at me. I respond, but I don't always write down who sent them. But as somebody pointed out to me, I really hope these are no more than rare, as do I, because that Swampert's going to be one hell of an expensive card if the pull rate isn't any good. So, yeah, new cards, exciting cards. And we're going to leave it with the news this week, ladies and gentlemen, because the erratas, which I pretty much skipped over, those 3 really exciting cards, and it looks like Primal Clash is going to be one hell of an interesting set. Combined with all the world's news, it's a big week, and we're 40 minutes in, and I think that's going to be enough. Plus, I want to be able to get this up online as quickly as I can, because a lot of people have got questions about it. A lot of people have not necessarily seen the information because it's been taken down, or are getting second-hand information from people who can no longer see the site, so I thought it was worth doing this. I might post the pictures up online if anybody really wants me to for the information, but for the time being, you've got this podcast. Now, I once again repeat, I'm going off the information which has been taken down. It is subject to change. I've just given you the information and my impressions thereof from what we have at the moment. I cannot make any guarantees it's perfect information, so please make sure to take it with a pinch of salt. Because, like I say, there is no guarantee it's going to be the same, although I would wager that it is going to stay as it is. Make sure you check out my YouTube channel, PTCG Radio. Just search for it on YouTube, you'll find it easy enough. I've done a video this week, a new type of video, top 10 cards from Phantom Forces, and I've put up a deck breakdown of the Night March deck, and a video I played with Alex Hill's Don fan list, playing against a Seismitoad deck. So get online, ladies and gentlemen, check all that stuff out. Thank you very much for listening, as always. Tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, and make sure you check out my YouTube channel as always. Look after yourselves till next week. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been listening, I should say, to PTCG Radio.